Progress.
Hi, my dear Astro family. Today we will be exploring the Saturn-Jupiter square that is coming up in 2024. This square will be happening 3 times actually. So once in August, once in December, and then also it's going to be taking place in 2025, June as well. So this is again a longer cycle. It's very interesting because it's triggering the Pluto-Saturn conjunction as well. So there is a reason, multiple reasons actually why we're going to be talking about this aspect today. Now, speaking about the devil, right, Saturn, I decided to put together a webinar about Saturn as the Lord of Karma. So in this webinar, we will be breaking down how Saturn is affecting your karmic existence in this incarnation. So if you are curious about this webinar, go on my website and check it out. Now, let's get going with this little lecture. Most likely it will be about a good 45 minutes. And most importantly, I would recommend to stay around till the very end because I'm going to give you some very useful information about how to work with this Saturn-Jupiter cycle. Now, what shall we say about it? I think it's going to be one of the most important aspects of 2024. And it will have an impact on 2025 as well. Now, the reasons why I wanted to talk about this is because we've got the upcoming new moon on the 11th of January that is going to be triggering the Saturn-Pluto conjunction on 21 degrees of Capricorn back in 2020 January. The other reason I wanted to talk about it is because we had the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction in 2020 December. And when actually the square between Saturn and Jupiter are taking place, Pluto will be on 0 degree of Aquarius, exactly where Saturn-Jupiter conjunction took place. So this is really important to look back. What have you done in the last 4 years? And to contemplate on them and to make certain type of changes. By the way, if you would like to hear more personalized horoscopes, then you might want to be signing up for my membership. You can do that on YouTube as well. You will be receiving 1 or 2 webinars a month, which is included in the price of the membership. I'm also going to be breaking down each week for you from an astrological perspective. Thirdly, you are going to be getting predictions or how it might be affecting you on a personal level by rising signs especially. So this is something I'm starting. I will be doing for you lunation reports every single month. It's going to be only available for my members. And on top of that, I will be actually doing the aspect of the week, and I'm going to be breaking that down for each individual signs as well. So you can get loads of benefits out of this membership. Now, Jupiter-Saturn square in 2024-25. So the dates are 19th of August, 24th of December, 2024, and then finally we're going to have the entire June 2025. The very first one is going to be happening from 17 degree of Gemini to 17 degree of Pisces. So as I said, we're always going to have to look at the cycle. So when we go back to ancient astrologers, these were some of the, obviously these were the last 2 visible planets. So they tend to, they were focusing on these planets quite significantly, right? And we tend to call them nowadays as social planets because they are impacting the society as well as the personal level as well, of course. Now, the conjunction took place in 2020 December, or the pre-shadow zone of these 2 started in 2020 September. So you might want to be looking back at those months, what happened in your life. I mean, when we look at the world, where actually the first COVID jabs arrived, we had kind of like an international treaty around pandemics, or at least the initiation of these treaty kind of started. And of course, in the US, Biden got elected. And then AI pretty much kicked off as well. And you know what? Zoom has become extremely successful, or became very successful around that period of time. Because, of course, one of the ways how we were able to connect to each other, to do our lectures, to teach students, and so forth, was through Zoom. So we should be expecting certain type of changes around this, actually. And the reason why is because we have got this Saturn Jupiter square coming up, and the squares are usually about adjustments we need to make. So the conjunction is always going to be about planting the seeds. Something is starting around that time, and then the square comes around, and then there is a realization that it might not be working the way how it has been implemented to start with. So we need to make certain type of changes. So, as I mentioned before, the current cycle between Saturn and Jupiter started in 2020, December, on 0 degree of Aquarius. One cycle lasts for approximately about 20 years, because the conjunction will be taking place every 20 years between these two planets. Usually it happens always in a different sign, though. So the 20-year cycle, what started 4 years ago, is actually, we should see some type of changes around those. Jupiter will move into the sign of Gemini at the end of May, around 26th of May, 2024. So immediately there will be a sign-based square between those two planets. So let's explore very briefly the meaning of Jupiter. It's the most benefic planet of all. Whatever it touches, it expands. It talks about our opinions, belief system, theories, but the travel industry, the education system, as well as the law, not just the universal law, but the law, whatever, kind of like the courts and the governments are coming up with. And also, this is the planet of luck as well. So I feel like with Saturn Jupiter in the sign of Aquarius, we were all meant to learn about certain type of theories. What does it mean to be three? Now, Saturn is a planet that is trying to crystallize something. So Saturn is putting a test to our knowledge, checking out whether we've learned all the theories, what we need to move forward. Remember, plenty of people tend to be scared of squares, right? But squares are all about an invitation to make adjustments in our life. It's kind of like an invitation point where something, two planetary energies needs to be fused. And on one hand, Saturn and Jupiter will tell you that your knowledge has no limits, or actually it tells you that your knowledge has got certain type of limits that you need to be exploring a little bit more. Jupiter is in the sign of Gemini, so that's the expansion of mind. So this is telling you that your own opportunities are in your own hands. You can expand your mind as far as you want to. Saturn wants you to put your mind to something, to commit to something. Now, of course, when we start reviewing what was going on in our lives in 2020, of course, we were locked up. Now, the question is, if you are still in prison somehow, if you are ready to take on a new adventure, if you are able to get out of that prison, the prison that you've created in your own head, and maybe this is talking to you about the abilities in a way, the abilities of changing your perceptions over certain type of things. I mean, one thing I would like to mention, which is very important when we talk about Saturn and Jupiter, often this is an indication of business cycles. The very first person who worked with the Saturn-Jupiter cycle was Abu Mazar in the 9th century. And basically, what he realized is that we have got about 11 to 14 conjunction in the same element. When we're talking about elements, it means fire, water, air, and earth. And we're going to have approximately about 48 conjunctions in the very same cycle. And one cycle lasts for approximately about 794 years. But that's the mean number. So it's going to be somewhere between 730 to 850 years altogether. Now, some claim that the one that occurred in 2020 was the very first time in 500 years since they met in the air signs. Now, that is not entirely true because we had one in Libra in the 1980s. And of course, that was, for example, when it comes to the AIDS crisis and so forth. So most likely we should be able to see that there is going to be tests made around curing this, for example. Now, when we look at the patterns of Saturn and Jupiter, every 60 years, so basically the fourth conjunction happens in the same sign. So if something is going down in the sign of Aquarius, the fourth conjunction from that is going to be happening also in the sign of Aquarius. So as I said, it takes about 790, 800 years to complete a full cycle. Now, Jupiter is the planet of expansion, while Saturn is about contraction. So Saturn is trying to make things smaller and Jupiter is trying to make things bigger. So of course, this is a contradictory energy. But whenever there is a square, an opposition happening between them two, then it becomes somehow, the focal point becomes the event that happened around the conjunction. So because they came up with certain type of vaccines, I would say that somehow the results of those vaccines are going to be coming up in 2024 and 25, maybe lurking into 2026 as well. Now, I mentioned to you that the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction took place in December or September. That is connected to the mean conjunction or the true conjunction. A true conjunction is when we can see the planets align in the sky. And the mean conjunction is more of a mathematical average that happens at regular intervals based on the planet's speed and their cycle length. So the mean conjunction actually took place on the 14th of September 2020. And actually that happened on 4 degrees of Gemini. Now that is very important that it happened on 4 degrees of Gemini rather than, I'm talking about the 2001. The 2001 Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, the true one happened on 22 degrees of Taurus, and then the mean conjunction would have taken place on 4 degrees of Gemini. Now, the current cycle that started on 0 degree of Aquarius, actually, the actual conjunction or the mean conjunction happened around 23, 24 degree of Capricorn. So, especially if you have got planet between those degrees, then this video is definitely for you. Now, the Saturn-Jupiter cycle in your natal chart shows major turning points in our lives. Often, this is bringing the shift of structures of societies, political changes, rise and fall of empires, death of a major political figures, also the introduction to new political systems as well. And often, unfortunately, Saturn and Jupiter does talk about poverty as well. Typically, the first 10 years of the Saturn-Jupiter cycle is a little bit on the tougher side. That's what we call as more of a Saturnian period. And many people actually are claiming now that 2024 is a Saturnian year from a numerological point of view. There is a square. So often this is a little bit of a push and pull, especially between Jupiter and Saturn, because Jupiter, as I said, wants to expand, especially the mind, the possibilities, the business ventures, and then Saturn is putting a restriction on it. So it slows things down. Your Aquarius house is going to be really impacted in the next 20 years. Right now, Pluto is there, the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction took place there. We had the previous Saturn-Mars cycle starting there, the Venus and Mars cycle, which is approximately about 2 years long anyway, but there is going to be starting also in the sign of Aquarius. So when we look at Saturn and Jupiter, this is very much about to master something, to crystallize your dreams. Pisces. And Jupiter is about finding meaning, to learn. And with Saturn and Jupiter, it's always very important to know that we all need to contribute to society. This is the first air connection, right? So when we talk about air, air is all about communication. So anything to do with the phone industry, computers, internet-related matters, smartphones, digital currencies, social media channels, and all these type of things gonna become very important by Jupiter moving into the sign of Gemini, basically. So very interesting. Now, Saturn can also indicate lack of products because Saturn, as I said, restricts things, takes things away, and Jupiter can represent excess of products, for example. So it brings more and more. So from that perspective, this could indicate that we're going to have loads of phones, for example, but Saturn in Pisces would represent that there is not enough medical equipment. Interesting, right? So, of course, Jupiter moving into the sign of Gemini could indicate, you know, languages, AI, internet, phone, the way how we make connections, what is our way of thinking. You know, is it going to indicate that there is going to be less thinking, more computerized methods, for example? But of course, Gemini represents the brain and the mind as well. It's about curiosity, excitement, small talks, verbal skills, the way we express ourselves, the way we learn, the way we use languages. It's the sign of curiosity, jokes, social media, data and information. And even it represents your breathing as well at the same time. So as I said, this square for me indicates that either we need to realize that our knowledge has got limits, or it is telling you that it's important to realize that, you know, no matter how old we are, Saturn is the old age, we can all learn something new. And that's important if we want to be moving forward. You know, Jupiter is also kind of like the children. It's the Santa Claus. So why am I bringing that up? Because if you think about it, every single child in the world is actually expecting Santa Claus to come around and bring presents, right? But Saturn is the parent archetype who says, oh, you need good grades. And then you get a fantastic Christmas present from Santa. Obviously, we are Santa Claus. So the question is, are we following through with this? What I'm trying to explain here is that Saturn works extremely well when you put your mind to it, when you have a plan, when you are ready to master things, when you are ready to crystallize certain type of, you know, you are ready to crystallize the knowledge, to put it to tests and to put it into practice, and you make it happen. Jupiter wants to take us on a new adventure, but Saturn as a parenting archetype puts barriers in front of us. Obviously, if a child would like to jump on the road while the cars are coming, the parent is going to stop that child. So pretty much parents are deciding whether we can do it or not. Jupiter is the archetype of saying yes, while Saturn says no to things. So what we are seeing here is that many of us can experience that we are trying to accomplish something. Let's say I'm trying to open a business, but then the government is saying no to it. Somehow we experiencing certain type of restrictions around our own dreams. And you might start asking yourself the question, why does it happen to me? So I think one of the major questions, and this is the reason why I've given this title to this video, is that how much can we dream? Can we dare to dream? This aspect is telling you that we all have got the ability to grow, but we might run into certain type of challenges. Are you ready to tackle these challenges? Saturn is reminding us that growth does not grow on trees. Just like this English saying is, money does not grow on trees. The tree, the roots, must be looked after. So are you aware of your own limitations? Are you pessimistic or optimistic? As I said, Jupiter will be in the sign of Gemini. This is a really weak position actually for Jupiter, because this is a Mercurian sign. So Gemini, which is very curious, Jupiter expands that. So we want to try loads of new things out. Jupiter in Gemini is very playful, scattered, often disorientated. Saturn comes around and says, grow up, girl, focus, structure your dreams, or you're going to fall apart. The other reason why Jupiter is a little bit weak in the sign of Gemini is because Jupiter is trying to connect the dots. It is not necessarily looking at the tree, it is looking at the forest. And Gemini can get kind of swayed by all the little details or all the information and data what we've got right in front of us. So Jupiter in Gemini never goes deep enough. Jupiter is looking at the whole experience, while Gemini might get bogged down with just one experience and then enjoying it to a certain extent, and we move on from one experience to another. So Saturn surely wants us to focus only on one or two things at the same time. You know, I'm going to give you an example here. When I do a relocation consultation with someone, I always ask them about their top priorities. And often the reply is that, oh, I just want my life to be better. And I usually tell them that this is not how relocation works. We cannot boost every single part of our lives. We need to have priorities. Because relocation astrology is very much about trying to get your strongest planet in the best possible house for them, or to amplify some of your great aspects, and so forth. Now, I'm not going to go into technical details, but it means that other parts of the charts might be struggling a little bit. So therefore, I love doing a good 20-minute interview with the client where they are in the moment of their lives, how well that planet works in their chart and how well it is not. So recently, I had a client with Venus in Leo. So I went through all the possible meaning of Venus in Leo to see whether they are using that planetary energy in the right way or not. It turned out they didn't. So we're going to have to fix that first, because there is, you know, you can move anywhere in the world, but if you are not using that energy pretty well, then we are going to be having issues. Another example, just a client yesterday, another relocation service I did. This is probably the second most popular reading of mine, Neptune on the midheaven. So I wanted to know whether they are using that Neptune correctly. Yes, the person was into psychotherapy and photography and dancing and all those type of things. So actually they do use their Neptune, which is great to see. They are not addicted. I went through all the possible meanings of Neptune just to see whether they are working with that planetary energy. So if I boosted their Neptune, then actually it could work for them better. I hope that makes sense. So this is exactly what this Saturn Jupiter is talking to you about. You can have dreams, but without going for your dreams, it's never going to work out. And it's very important that we focus only on one or two things at the same time. Because when you are trying to focus on 25 things at once, guess what? It's not going to work out for you. So the square is very much about an invitation to act on something. Here we are reminded to act on our own dreams. Is it easy? Not easy, because Saturn and Jupiter are opposite polarities. Saturn is in Pisces. Pisces loves dreaming. It's the la-la fantasy land in a way. But Jupiter is actually the dispositor of Saturn. So Saturn is looking for advice and guidance from Jupiter. But Jupiter is in Gemini. So being scattered, not knowing necessarily which direction to go to, what idea to jump on, because we've got too many things going in our plates. So I would say that Saturn has got the upper hand here. Saturn is trying to organize the Piscean themes in your life. So you might want to be looking at where Saturn is in your, where Pisces is in your natal chart. Let's say it goes through my first house. So I've got a idealism going on about how a perfect body should look like. So this is telling me to kind of put effort into it, but also knowing that it takes time. Saturn Jupiter for me, especially with Jupiter being in the sign of Gemini, which could represent business transactions, this could indicate that people are going to start selling their assets, for example. Also, it could indicate, as in Saturn, I feel like having the upper hand in this constellation, that people will come up with rules to kind of put barriers to something that is uncontrollable. I mean, just try to contain the ocean. Never going to happen. So I think one of the most important elements with this aspect is that we do need to make compromises when it comes to our dreams. Not everything is possible at the same time. Because Saturn is in a Jupiterian sign. It is looking for guidance from Jupiter, as I mentioned earlier. So are you going to allow your mind to be all over the place? Or are you going to be just sticking to a couple of ideas what you have? Because I feel like Saturn has got the upper hand in this combo. Most likely, I would say the no's are going to be coming into our lives more than the opportunities, or at least for us as a society. Often we tend to be looking at Saturn as the planet of burden. But burden is also a gift. That is a reminder as well. We should remember that everything has got two sides. We all experience pain and pleasure at the same time. Burdens move us forward. When we have an open mind and we constantly learn about new roads and possibilities, not every single road is going to be without any type of bumps. But when we get there, we feel accomplished. We feel that the reward has just arrived. I'll give you an example. Let's say you read a book about how to become rich. Why am I talking about that? Because Jupiter is in Gemini, and often the dream around that is that I would like to become a business person. But when we do not apply all those goodies we read in that book, we're not going to become rich. So then why are you reading that book? Jupiter in Gemini would represent something to do with your mental existence, while Saturn in Pisces would be talking to you about your spiritual reality. Jupiter is more about the future. Saturn is focusing on the present. But this is also telling me that you need to learn to also enjoy what is given to you right now. Because if you do not show appreciation to the little things, what is right in front of you, then are you going to be able to appreciate the bigger things coming around? I mean, in the world, we might see again travel restrictions. That was one of the major topics in 2020 and 21. Or maybe how will travel and education change in the next 5 years? That could be a major topic. Surely these two will be changing. I feel like Saturn representing the borders are going to be changing in the world. And this is something I have spoken about before. Also, this is very possible that it's going to bring some religious movements for us, or even with Saturn in Pisces, the need to look at your self-destructive behavior, breaking down your unrealistic thoughts, breaking down the unrealistic picture of what success actually means. Jupiter in Gemini tells you that you need to have faith in your mental strength, whether it is yourself or a higher power you believe in. But with Saturn and Jupiter in the mental cross, it's all about spiritual and intellectual strength. Are you limiting your own spirituality? Do you have loss of a faith in something? Maybe due to plenty of people sharing their limited knowledge, because we all have got limited knowledge. Do you deny what is right in front of you? Do you misread the information that is right in front of your eyes? Do you want to believe in something badly that might lead you to disappointments? Do you feel like that the world is going crazy, or you are going crazy? Mental health could be a major topic in the next few years. So hopefully this is going to be bringing the rise of psychology as well as the mystical things. Saturn in Pisces wants to dissolve the boundaries, removing barriers from our life. Jupiter is magnifying that. So it becomes visible for you. What is holding you back? What are those fears that you need to shuffle underneath the carpet, or better, flush it down in the toilet so it doesn't necessarily come back anymore? Or maybe do you feel responsible for someone or something bad that happened in your life, especially somewhere around 2020? Then it's time to actually move away from it. Pisces often is a little bit confusing. So what is confusing you? Are you just floating around without any aim or purpose? Or finally, you're going to come up with some great ideas and you're going to implement them? I mean, you know, virtual reality became a major topic in 2020 as well. So we might start seeing those spreading, for example. What else? Oh, of course, both of the planets are talking about politicians as well as political structures. So maybe this is the realization that the current political structure is not necessarily working for every single country. So we need to be modifying the law around these. This makes sense because Pluto is still back and forth between Aquarius and the 29 degree of Capricorn anyway. So remember that with conjunction is the rebirth of something, or it's the birth of something. We tend to be planting the seeds. Now, squares can indicate the crisis situations in the system that we created back 4 years ago. So what did you create in 2020? Saturn Jupiter tells you to check your belief system, make adjustments around your belief system, do a bit of a reality check, whether your own thoughts are real, what you read in social media is actually real, or all these facts and data are just fear-driven. Do you listen to other people's opinion, for example? You know, somehow you need to balance out growth and expansion with your responsibility and limitations. This could indicate, for example, that you would like to start fresh, but unfortunately, you have to pay the bills at the same time. Jupiter is in learning. You would like to learn, let's say, medical astrology with me, but unfortunately, you feel like that you are not going to be benefiting or you cannot commit to it 100% just because you have got responsibilities that you need to attend. So there is a bit of a tension with square between your desires to expand and the desire to establish security, stability in your life. Jupiter is going to encourage you to take risks and to aim, to shoot for a bigger goal. While Saturn says, oh, stay a bit more realistic. You're trying to shoot the arrow really far. Why are we not shooting it a little bit closer? And then explore the territory around that. So we've got these two planets that are in disagreement about what would be the best course of action. This is an inner tension. Often it comes with loads of criticism, loads of limiting circumstances. So long-held belief systems are going to break down, in my opinion. Often this aspect could bring uncertainty about your future. Maybe events are going to be happening in the world or in your personal life that is asking you to reassess your previously held, maybe outdated belief systems, maybe to look at your destructive behavior in a way. And the third reason why I wanted to make this video today, because this upcoming new moon is brilliant. I've just posted it a couple of days ago, so you might want to be checking that out. But we've got a Jupiter-Saturn sextile with Mars being involved. So there's a Mars and Jupiter trine, while Mars is actually sextiling Saturn and Saturn is sextiling Jupiter. So for me, this is the day when intentions about the future and our achievements need to be made. But this Saturn-Jupiter is asking us to look at whether we are addicted to something, because that needs to end. Also, I can imagine that there is going to be a little bit more understanding about how the body functions. I think it's going to be affecting the medical field significantly, especially when it comes to the body fluids or the resonancy of water in our body. Or overall, our body is just going to be a little bit more of a testing point. I mean, we've got the mental cross getting activated here. So it can indicate that plenty of people are going to be anxious. But ask yourself the question, how far did you come since 2020? Remember that Jupiter is about theories, Saturn is about foundation. So we're going to have to look at our foundation in our belief system. And that is going to be questioned. By the way, very interesting that the first one is going to be, the first square between Saturn and Jupiter is going to be taking place on 19th of August, 2024. And we're going to have a full moon in the sign of Aquarius on the very same day. It's just going to be on 27 degrees of Aquarius. So that is telling me that it's going to get highlighted because, of course, this full moon is going to be ruled by Saturn. So watch out what is happening in August. I think it's going to be a big day. Well, guys, just I wanted to talk about this aspect briefly. Of course, closer to the date, we're going to bring this topic up again, surely, because this is going to be an ongoing theme for a good 1 year. So I will give you more practical tips about it. But I wanted to give a heads up now with the Saturn, Mars, and Jupiter little mini triangle, because I feel like you can start making certain type of adjustments so that the transition with this more of a challenging aspect is going to be a lot easier for many of you. Thank you, everyone, and hope to see you on the Saturn as the Lord of Karma webinar coming up soon. See you later. Bye-bye.